Money FM 89.3. Best of breakfast. Morning Shot.
Welcome along to Morning Shot. I am Emaad Akhtar. The Trump administration has revoked the visas of around 600 international students over stances they took on the Israel-Gaza conflict that the government said was a threat to U.S. national security. To quote Secretary of State Marco Rubio in a recent news conference, "We gave you a visa to come and study and get a degree, not to become a social activist that tears up our university campus. We've given you a visa and you decide to do that, we're going to take it away." Now, many of these students were arrested and detained without any official charges to their name. And that's drawn criticism from free speech advocates who have cited gross violations of the First Amendment. So the big question is, will this tarnish the U.S.'s image as a champion of democratic values and a highly sought-after destination for higher education? We're going to hopefully get those answers from Dr. Lincoln Mitchell. He makes a return to the show. Professor, School of International and Public Affairs, Columbia University. Good evening in your neck of the woods, Dr. Mitchell.
Thank you for having me back. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, pleasure to have you on. I hope you've had a big dinner because I'm going to be picking a huge chunk of your brain for this chat.
Well, I'm having dinner after we do this. So
all right, sounds good. So we can't run away from the headlines. Not an insignificant number of international university students taken by immigration agents, having their legal status questioned. I'm just going to describe a couple of incidents for the listeners. Turkish graduate student Rumeysa Ozturk was detained by masked agents in plain clothes as she walked to meet friends for dinner. She says she was targeted over an op-ed about Gaza that she wrote in the Tufts University student newspaper. And then we have Columbia University graduate student Mahmoud Khalil arrested in his university housing despite being a legal permanent resident. He says he was taken over his peaceful protests against Israel's war in Gaza. What is your take, Dr. Mitchell, on why this is happening? Is it an unprecedented moment in recent American history?
Well, there's a lot going on there. First, I think it is important here to say that specifically, I'm a professor at Columbia. It is generally not considered peaceful to physically stop students from attending class because of their ethnic or racial background. It is generally not considered peaceful to celebrate the massacre of people because of their ethnic and racial background. And the group that Khalil was leading did that. And I say that because there is this growing sense, particularly on the left, that there was no anti-Semitism. They were all just peaceful protesters. I saw these people with my eyes celebrating the massacre of Jews, and I saw them calling for it to happen again. So it's not peaceful. Now, it's also completely legal. That's the kind of the irony here, right? We have to hold two thoughts in our heads at the same time. Khalil was part of a group that was, by any rational definition, deeply anti-Semitic. Not every member, but as a policy, deeply anti-Semitic. However, there are no laws against that in the United States. You are allowed to be anti-Semitic. You are allowed to be racist. The President of the United States has trafficked in anti-Semitic tropes and imagery that Hitler and the Nazis and the czars in Russia used, right? So if he's going to start deporting people for being anti-Semites, he should probably start with Elon Musk. So I say this because it's complicated, and both these issues have to be understood at the same time. What they are doing is illegal. It is an attack on free speech, and it is helping to really destroy America's standing in the world. The woman at Tufts University, Ms. Ozturk, who is Turkish, this is even more dramatic. She wrote an op-ed. I read the op-ed. It's not so great. It's kind of like the kind of thing a not very smart undergraduate who had a lot of kind of pro-Palestinian Hamas people feeding them information would have written. But that's what college newspapers are for, right? They're for people to work out their ideas, to say things that when they're, 45 and working, they're not going to be a little more sophisticated. You can't deport people who are not breaking any laws because they're writing op-ed you don't like. And none of these people are a threat to the national security of the United States. If the United States of America, with the strongest and biggest military in the history of the world, is threatened by a graduate student who writes a kind of not very sophisticated opinion piece, we might as well pack it up now. So I hope that helps answer the question. There's a lot going on here, but the bottom line is this is outrageous what's happening to these people.
Yeah, it is very complex indeed. In your opinion, are we seeing somewhat of a legal gray zone here, or are students being detained in ways that raise serious red flags about civil liberties? Are they being deported without due process?
I don't think there's a gray zone here at all. I think it's absolutely a problem. And it's very clear. And it's not just students. It's other people, too. But we should note something else. If a student is deported, and some students at universities around the United States have said, I'm not even going to stick around. I saw my name on a list, or I'm just leaving because I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to be harassed. I don't want to end up in these brutal prisons in El Salvador where people are being sent. So some people are just leaving. So what's the effect of this? It's an attack on civil liberties because, and again, we're talking now about students who are from other countries. So listen, I've had students from Singapore, right? And I teach in a graduate program. They did their undergraduate work in Singapore. They come to the United States. They're frankly generally very, very good students. But in the context of the graduate program where they're studying, people talk about politics, right? In my seminars, we have to talk about politics, about foreign policy, about democracy. Now, if they're afraid in that classroom that if they say something critical of the United States, they're going to get turned in and deported, it's not crazy to think that. So, of course, why would they want to come here? And if they're already here, they're going to keep their mouth shut. And to go back to Khalil, he's a permanent resident. He's not here on a visa. Or he wasn't. He's a permanent resident. Permanent residents, for modern history in the 20th century of the United States, have always enjoyed all the First Amendment rights of citizens. And he did nothing. I mean, I don't particularly share his views. I wouldn't want him in my home. I think he's been disingenuous about representing what he said and felt about the Jewish people. But it's protected speech. It's absolutely legal. And he's a permanent resident. And if you go for a permanent residence for their speeches, for what they say, eventually the citizens are going to get scared, right?
Absolutely.
So this is much worse than the slippery slope. This is a full frontal attack on civil liberties. They're picking on the weakest, right? They're picking on people who they feel they can portray as being part of something a lot of people don't like. But in some of these cases, I mean, this woman at Tufts, Ms. Akhtar, she's just like, I think she's like a chemistry student or something. I mean, it's just terrible.
Yeah, you're on the ground. What kind of pressure are university administrations under, both from the government and the public, when dealing with student protests?
Well, again, I'm not an administrator. I'm a professor, so I don't have those problems on my plate. But it's increasingly difficult. You have to be able. I mean, Harvard University basically said, this is what it means. We don't need your money, and it was $9 billion. Now we'll see what happens. Columbia could have said that, and they didn't. And it's a lot of pressure because Columbia, the deal they cut, one of our academic departments now has to go into receivership, right? Which means the federal government will oversee it. They're talking about doing that for the whole university. At that point, you're not a university. At that point, how can you talk about ideas of not just free speech and the kind of politics where people might disagree about the war in Ukraine or the war in Gaza, but what about the hard sciences, right? We have people at Harvard, at Columbia, at Berkeley, at most major universities doing important research, let's say, in medicine or biology, right? And we have a Health and Human Services secretary who doesn't believe in essentially modern medicine. So you might talk about free speech about Gaza or something, but what about the free speech to say we should develop a better vaccine for the flu, for measles, for COVID? That's now considered speech that could get you in trouble. So this is an effort. It is using the issue of anti-Semitism from what is by most, and I say this as someone who's paid attention to this issue over the years, the most anti-Semitic administration in modern American history. It is using the issue of anti-Semitism to destroy the universities. And the result is the universities will be weaker, free speech will be endangered, and every Jew in America will be less safe because they're exacerbating anger and hatred of Jews from groups that basically don't like us already.
Yeah, let's double down on the point you've just touched on. That is the Trump administration, well, not just signing an executive order to dismantle the Department of Education a few weeks ago, but really doubling down on restricting federal funding for top-tier universities lest they meet certain criteria. As you pointed out, Columbia faced the loss of government grants to the tune of $400 million, and they opted to yield to many of the most substantial demands of the administration. And it kind of stunned and dismayed many members of the faculty, I'm sure yourself included. What's the mood like among professors and students right now? And is Columbia's response to the White House demands setting a dangerous precedent, irrespective of the fact that Harvard has not caved?
Well, it sets a very dangerous precedent because they were never going to stop at Columbia. And, I'm glad that Harvard didn't cave, but other universities will. Remember, Harvard has a $40 billion endowment, right? So they can withstand this for a few years. Smaller universities, less wealthy, and Harvard's the most wealthy university in the United States, has. Now, Columbia could have. The mood is complicated because the truth is, on some level, you go in and you teach your classes, right? And this is getting towards the end of the semester. So my students, particularly, I'm teaching undergraduates this semester, they're kind of working on their final papers. if they're graduating, they want to get all the work in and graduate, and if not, they want to finish the semester. So there is, these are schools where there's a pretty substantial amount of academic work that students have to do. In the bigger picture, there's real concern, right? I mean, these are, I'm not saying this to toot my own horn, but to be a student at Columbia is a big deal. People work very hard to get here as high school students, as professionals before they come back to grad school. And, this is considered a very good academic job to teach at a place like Columbia. And frankly, it is. On the other hand, if the university is not going to have your back, you really have to think about it. So there is a real concern. There's a lot of people thinking about their own individual decisions. And I mean, Tim Snyder, who is one of the leading American scholars of fascism, left Yale University, which has been a little under the radar, but it'll be their turn eventually, and has gone to the University of Toronto, which is in a different country, right? Toronto's in Canada, because of his concerns. So a lot of people are, the university as the American university that we knew on October 6, 2023, to a great extent doesn't.
Yeah, Professor, final question, just to try and summarize everything we've discussed here. Will all of this tarnish the U.S.'s global image, you think, as a champion of democratic values, as well as a highly sought-after destination for higher education?
I think with regards to both, absolutely. Absolutely. It is impossible for anybody with a straight face to say the United States is a champion of democratic values, or really the United States is still a democracy. And as far as, look, we still have great professors at the great universities in the United States, but if you're a student, and maybe you're not even concerned about Gaza, right? Maybe it's not your issue, but you never know when, let's say you're a Christian from Africa. You never know where there could be some ugly racist incident where there's protest on your campus and you join because you're African or you're black and you're upset by maybe a black student got beat up by a white cop or something, and now they're throwing you out of the country. So I think this fear, which is what they're trying to do, to making this a less appealing place to come, and not just as a student. Our international students help make our universities among the very best in the world. But also, many American cities, including the one I'm in right now, rely on huge international tourism to help stimulate our economy. Right? We rely on drawing the top professionals after college. Maybe they went to grad school here or in their own country. But now they're a great computer scientist, or they're a great engineer, or a great doctor doing research on curing cancer. We draw these people. But now people from other countries, whether to study or after their studies, or just to spend some money and have a good time, are going to think twice about coming, and they already are. And that is bad for the United States in many, many ways.
Yeah, Professor, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you on to talk about this rather complex issue. It's evolving, it's developing, but pretty unreal times that we're living in. So I appreciate it. You've earned your dinner, and I hope you tuck into some borscht again.
Okay, take care.
All right, see you. That was Dr. Lincoln Mitchell, Professor, School of International and Public Affairs at Columbia University. Stay with Money FM 89.3.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.